In 2021, we got rid of most of our stuff, put the rest in storage, ended our lease, packed everything into 4 suitcases and 2 backpacks, and we set off overseas. We delivered our only child to college in Scotland and spent the next 3 months exploring Portugal, looking for a place to live full-time as expats. That trip to Portugal didn't really work out. The expat fantasy didn't really seem to match the reality. An overseas relocation is hard. Maybe we started 10 years too late. It wore us out. When we finally came to realize the amount of work that it was going to take, we began to consider other options. In this video, we'll talk about the main reasons why it didn't work out for us. But first, a disclaimer. Your experience may vary. We tried this in the EU, other areas may be different. This represents our personal reactions. Relocating as an expat may work out great for you. We view these things through our personal needs and preferences. Yours may be different. And we may change our minds later if we find a place that works for us. So, on to the reasons. The housing was not really what we had hoped for. We'd spent the last few years browsing the real estate sites for the places we had been fantasizing about moving to. The online listings looked good. We assumed that we could find something that would be a better deal than in the US. A modern house on the coast in Portugal with a sea view for half the cost of what you'd spend in the US. So we met with real estate agents and saw a number of houses. The housing prices were overheated in Lisbon and many of the other places that we liked, so the cost advantage was not that great. Or we saw apartments and houses, but with big flaws that the owners were trying to hide so they could unload the property to a foreigner. A big issue for us was how the houses were sited. We were looking for a neighborhood of consistent housing, but what we were finding was pretty random. Individual houses may have been fine, but they were built next to abandoned warehouses on a road that looked like a post-apocalyptic wasteland. Well, not quite that bad, but more like any rundown area you'd find in the US. And the more desirable houses in consistent neighborhoods ended up being priced much higher than we expected. So basically, as far as buying a home, the reward didn't really seem to match the level of risks involved. We eventually decided that renting would be less risky, especially as a first step of any expat move. The systems are not familiar or transparent. This came up in our housing search. The purchase process for real estate is pretty opaque compared to the US. You can't obtain much information about the pricing history of houses. There's no comprehensive listing of houses you can search. All the documents are in a foreign language, so you have to hire a translator. And the buying process seemed a bit opaque and risky. There didn't seem to be as much protections for buyers, which was especially important for us as foreigners. And we had to place a bit too much trust in our real estate agents to protect our interests. And the taxes and the fees for a real estate purchase can really add up. We were hesitant to pay 10% in upfront taxes and fees. We felt like we were going to be on the losing end in any purchase transaction. And this is also an issue in other areas. The bureaucracies that you need to navigate to get yourself set up are not as responsive as the ones in the US for both government and commercial services. Everyone says you get used to it and build in a longer lead time to get anything done, but we're getting a bit too old to wait that out. And then taxes and immigration. The main reason we picked Portugal was the non-habitual resident program, which had reasonable tax and residency rules. But that program's ending, so it's back to the drawing board to assess the tax impacts of becoming a resident. The EU has high taxes in general, but the higher levels of wealth and inheritance taxes prevented us from considering many EU countries that would otherwise be perfect. Our favorite quote from a financial planner we spoke with was that Europe was a great place to live and an awful place to die. He was talking about the taxes on inheritances. We had spent our entire lives growing up in the US and paid our share of income and other taxes, along with paying full retail for everything from childcare to health insurance to colleges. And not that we had accumulated that much, but we weren't interested in paying a substantial amount of our hard-earned savings to any government for the privilege of living there for a few years, or giving up 40% or so of assets we were going to leave to our daughter once we passed away. If you have any savings, any real estate, a 401k, or other assets, make sure you get professional help figuring out the full impact of the range of taxes you're going to be liable for in the country that you're thinking about relocating to. You can even do consultations online via video conference to help you make an initial assessment of a specific country. Depending on the country tax laws, the type of assets, and your overall long-term plan, it may work fine for you. Or you may select another country to move to, or you may become less enthusiastic about the idea of relocating. And the immigration rules can also get in the way. At the time we were exploring visa options, Portugal required you to be in the country for at least 6 months each year. We wanted to travel around the EU and come back to the US for a few months each year, which would have impacted our residency. And if you want the full US tax benefits of being an expat, the foreign earned income exclusion, you can only visit the US for a total of 35 days a year. So that was a bit too restrictive for us as well. Getting in sync with the foreign country can be exhausting. Learning how to navigate in a foreign environment can be a challenge. We wanted to assimilate, to speak the language, to eat the food, take on the customs, interact with the bureaucracies, learn mass transit, healthcare, grocery shopping, appliances, stores, and entertainment. But that can be overwhelming. A lot of the issues you encounter are small, but they can be frustrating. We've been trapped in an underground garage because we couldn't figure out how to use the payment machine. Gone online to search for English directions on how to use a stove or washing machine. Or deciding to go to McDonald's for lunch, which we never did back in the States, because we could order in English using a kiosk. Then having to search for online pronunciations of numbers in Portuguese on our phones so we could identify when our order was ready. These types of minor frictions can add up, and they made us worried about our ability to address larger issues, like a health emergency. We know that it would have become easier as time passed, but for us, it seemed like too much work. We were getting a bit hesitant about spending our remaining time and energy learning a difficult new language so we could just do basic things to survive. And it's lonely. We were missing some key factors that would ease our assimilation into the new country. A job, kids, and a few friends. We didn't have any of those. After our initial excitement diminished, a sense of isolation and loneliness set in. Our main contact with people were local real estate agents. We assumed once our permanent move was done, we could take intentional steps to meet new people or meet up with other US expats. But an expat is always going to be a foreigner in any new country, and that can limit your level of connection with other people. We missed our friends and family back home, and the ease of connecting with other Americans back home. So we were happy to get back to the US to rest and reassess our situation. For us, the full-time expat experience was going to take a lot of effort and risk, and maybe not be the amazing lifestyle we had fantasized about. We spent some time thinking about how to make it work and about alternatives. Maybe there was a way to minimize the downside while retaining what we liked about living in new places. So we landed on being part-time expats or slow travelers, keeping a streamlined home in the US and spending a few months at a time overseas in the places that we loved. This gives us a lot of what we like without the effort of a full-scale relocation. If this sounds like something that fits your plans, check out our other videos and our newsletter. And please like and subscribe. Thanks for watching.